First though, Barbara Ernst Prey has been painting for as long as she can remember.
Her work is in collections around the globe. While she lives in New York and travels the world to paint, she has deep roots here and comes back to Maine throughout the year for work and inspiration.
She has a summer home in Tennant's Harbor and a gallery in Port Clyde. 207's Peggy Kaiser recently visited with Prey on a perfect Maine day, the kind of day that just might end up in one of her paintings.
Indeed. I first met Barbara Ernst Prey about 20 years ago, and although she had already been an admired watercolorist for decades, it seemed at the time that her career was about to take off. Her success since then should not come as a surprise when you discover that she learned at the knee of another talented artist.
I was really fortunate to grow up in with a mother who was head of the design department at Pratt Art Institute in New York. So we had this big studio. I thought this was normal. And she was always painting, and she'd take me out painting when I was little. Or when I was sick, I was the model. I had this wonderful role model, and I just thought that that's what you did. So she was an oil painter, was her primary, and so that's why I did watercolors, because I didn't want to compete with her.
Barbara Ernst Prey's early work involved pen and ink drawings for the New Yorker magazine. She'd sit on the streets of New York City capturing the buildings and architecture. That sense of composition has carried over to her landscapes and use of color, and it would seem that every turn in the road on the way to Port Clyde provides inspiration.
I'm working in a tradition, if you think of American landscape painting, that has always been, there's Homer, Sargent, it's always been kind of male-driven. And a lot of them have painted up here on Acadia and around here on Monhegan. So I'm really doing something very different as a female landscape painter, painting in that tradition, but I'm looking at it from a totally different perspective. Maine has always been a major source of inspiration for me, and my family actually has deep roots to Maine. They were the first settlers of Vinyl Haven, North Haven, and the Mid-Coast. So they came over in the 1700s. So for me, it's part of my DNA, and I love to paint the old houses and history.
In 2003, out of the blue, Prey received a call from the White House, an invitation to paint the Christmas card for that year.
Because I got to spend a lot of time at the White House and draw all over and paint all over, and then I worked with Laura Bush to decide which painting would be the official White House Christmas card. So that was, and it's in the permanent collection of the White House. That's really how you become in the collection of the White House. You're either dead or you do the White House Christmas card.
Prey lives outside of New York City on Long Island, and her small town lost 41 people in the 9/11 tragedy. She found herself drawn to the peace that Maine provided in the aftermath of that event.
And what I loved is that the flags were everywhere, and for that to me, that symbolized the spirit of the people coming together. So one of my first paintings was actually down here that I did, and that's right now in the ambassador's office at the U.S. mission to the UN. And actually, it's funny, Ambassador Powers selected it and Ambassador Haley kept it.
So you're taking pieces of Maine really all over the world.
And in all different places. Like, you never know where they'll end up.
About 15 years ago, Prey's work began to be selected as part of the Art in Embassies program, which has meant that dozens of her watercolors hang in United States embassies worldwide. But it was a call from NASA that nudged her to begin painting from a completely different perspective, that of outer space. NASA commissioned her 4 times to capture their iconic spacecraft. In the context of NASA, that's not a subject matter that you would normally paint.
No.
And yet you're asked to paint a particular subject. How is that as an artist, and how does that challenge you?
For me as a painter, it really helped me see, I do paint nature and landscapes, but it also helped me see the world in a very different perspective from the sky, from really a cosmic perspective. And I did a lot of research. I did the International Space Station, which was so cool, the Columbia tribute painting, and then the Discovery shuttle when it relaunched, which was again a real honor, and the X-43, which is the fastest aircraft in the world. So I got to go to Edwards Air Force Base and watch it take off.
Prey is painting all the time, traveling, painting on site, and lately trying her hand at oils. Her latest commission for the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, or MassMoCA, had her pushing the limits of watercolor in ways she had never imagined.
I was approached by the director and the museum to do a commission for them of what is believed to be the largest watercolor in the world. It's 8 feet by 16 feet. It took 2 years to do, and right now hung in the prow at the front of their new building, which just opened. So Mass MoCA is such a process museum, so it was really figuring out how to do that. How I had scaffolding, I was going up and down, back and forth. I had ladders, and I had to find the paper to do it. I had to find the place to paint it.
The project started with small sketches that called upon Prey's background in architectural drawing. She began the work in her New York studio, eventually moving it to her studio in Williamstown, Massachusetts, so she could be close to the museum and do some of the work on site.
The commission was at the building. It's an old mill before it was renovated. So it fits right into the space, and it's facing the space, the renovated space. So it really has a history. So I really had this wonderful connection with the space. So that was a challenge, and putting it all together. You just hope that it's, from what you see and when you put the framing together. I mean, it really was. It's a master work to have created that and put it together, and it's something that's really exciting and so fun to do. And if you do any sort of commission, you have to be really excited about doing it.
I would imagine.
Because it brings your spirit and your soul into it.
The painting took 2 years to complete. Prey says that watercolor is an unforgiving medium and you cannot make a mistake. So approaching this massive painting meant meticulous planning and sketching. The finished painting is considered the largest watercolor in the world. The frame alone weighs 300 pounds. Prey currently has 2 shows in Maine, Earth, Sea, Sky South in her gallery in Port Clyde through September 4th, and Earth, Sea, Sky North is at the Wendell Gilley Museum on Mount Desert Island through October 14th. If you'd like to learn more, we will have a link to her website in the 207 section of our website.
Really incredible work she's doing too.
She has such an amazing career. It's hard to capture it all in a short period of time, but she's just won so many awards and received such accolades. She's really remarkable.
Got some talented people here in Maine.
We sure do.
Thanks, Peg.